All right, welcome back, Lucas. Going to do a battle here tonight. Look forward to these every week or every other week, man. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Chris. How are you doing?
Oh man, I'm pretty good, man. Pretty good. Can't complain. So we're going to do Fredericksburg, right?
Yeah, Fredericksburg. We're coming up on the anniversary here in December, and we thought we could shed some light on parts of the Fredericksburg battle that people might not know about, or at least give them some good information to go along with their day.
Okay. Well, how do you want to start into them? Right from the end of the um, Northern Virginia campaign after Appomattox? I mean, not Appomattox. Excuse me, Sharpsburg.
Yeah, the military situation is pretty bleak for the Confederacy, at least as far as their campaigns are concerned. Both the Kentucky campaign and the Maryland campaign was repulsed, but both armies are intact, so it's not like they were soundly destroyed. But their goals were not met. Bragg was not able to bring Kentucky into the Confederacy or get the tens of thousands of troops he planned on acquiring in Kentucky to actually materialize, and Lee was unable to threaten as much of the North as he intended to do, or invade as far as he wanted to in the Maryland campaign. So both of those were repulsed. Now Abraham Lincoln is in a unique situation because he has just issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. Um, he wanted a victory to issue it after, but he got Antietam, which we can call a draw, but Lee did retreat. He did withdraw across the river. So to a lot of people, it looked like a victory. And so Lincoln has issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. It will take effect on January 1st, 1863. And he needed more victories, especially in the East. He needed to keep morale up. He also needed to protect his administration's image. Um, to do this, he needs to replace McClellan. McClellan is replaced in early November 1862 with Ambrose Burnside, who didn't really have a lot of confidence in his own ability to control an army. But he took the position to really prevent Joseph Hooker from getting the position. Those two didn't see eye to eye. Burnside was a pretty good choice as far as you could tell up to that point. He had done some pretty good service in North Carolina. He had performed decently well at Antietam, even though the attacks across Burnside Bridge are infamous. He was able to push the Confederates back, and the only thing that stopped him from uh, flanking Robert E. Lee's army was the approach of A.P. Hill's men that day. So he's not a bad commander, and from all aspects of looking at the situation, seems like a decent choice if nothing else. And so Burnside takes over for McClellan, and McClellan's already got a plan drawn up that he is going to invade, he is going to push towards Richmond. Burnside takes that and just builds upon it. Burnside, we don't know exactly what McClellan would have exactly done, but Burnside takes it as kind of a foundation for his battle plan, and he wants to move across the Rappahannock River and threaten Richmond. That's the ultimate goal. Bring Robert E. Lee, engage him. Remember, Burnside is commanding the largest Union army up to that point. It's well over 100,000 men. I mean, this is a huge juggernaut moving. And Lee is spread out as as usual. We always kind of joke around that Lee loves to split his force, and he did. At this point, Jackson's in the valley. He's near Winchester in the Shenandoah Valley, um, and Longstreet's near Culpeper Courthouse. So they're ways away from one another. And Burnside has the initiative. He's going to be moving across the river, and he's going to try to threaten Richmond. And since Lee is separated, there's not a better time to do this. To get across the Rappahannock River, though, especially in the wintertime when a lot of times the rivers will rise, he needs pontoon bridges. So he orders them. Almost as soon as he takes over command of the army, he orders the pontoon bridges to be sent to him so he can cross the Rappahannock River on time. This is met with a whole bunch of delays. They don't get to him as quickly as he wants them to. And by the time he starts moving his army closer and closer to Fredericksburg, Lee has already found out the situation, and he quickly moves Longstreet's corps initially, first of all, to block Burnside's approach at Fredericksburg, and even before he asks Jackson to come to his aid, or orders Jackson to come to his aid, Jackson's already on the move. He's covering about 20 miles a day because he knows that there's something up. And so they're on their way. Jackson's men is on their way. So Lee has about half of his army staring back at Burnside across from Fredericksburg. And Burnside has divided up his army. He's created 3 what he called grand divisions. The right grand division is under Sumner. It consists of the 2nd and the 9th Corps. The center grand division is under Joseph Hooker, which consists of the 3rd and 5th Corps. And the left grand division is under William B. Franklin, which has the 1st and the 6th Corps. So he's divided up his army, 6 corps, 2 in each grand division. And this is what he's going to approach Fredericksburg with. So, any questions so far?
Yeah, I got several.
Okay.
When did Lincoln relieve McClellan of command?
This is early November. I think it's November 4th, but I might be corrected on that. Early November, 1862.
Why did Burnside and Hooker not like each other? Or, I've heard that Burnside didn't think he had the ability to command, but he didn't want Hooker to do it. It's kind of like cutting off his, hurt his army and his own shortcomings.
Burnside and Hooker were, I think some of it stemmed from Antietam, because Burnside was actually commanding both the 1st and the 9th Corps simultaneously with it was a weird command structure that McClellan had instituted Burnside to have to command for, and I just it's personal squabbles between the 2 corps commanders that it's like Hooker doesn't think that Burnside knows what he's talking about. Burnside doesn't know what Hooker doesn't think Hooker knows what he's talking about. It's a difference in military protocol, things like that. Nothing big to my knowledge that really separated these two. It was just 2 people that didn't get along personally together.
Okay. So this is a winter campaign. These are unusual. Why was McClellan going to do this?
You're exactly right. I'm glad you brought that up. Winter campaigns are especially weird in 19th century warfare, but any kind of warfare. One reason you don't want to move in the wintertime is lots of times the wintertime brings a lot of rain, or at least a lot of snow, and when the snow melts, if you're in a certain climate, it's going to raise up rivers. It's going to make it difficult for your army to move. Armies can move across roads a lot better, but one reason McClellan was even going to be launching this, there's really 2 reasons that McClellan and Burnside as well is going to do this campaign. Is one thing, Lincoln needs the victories. We need to do victories. So Lincoln's prodding them. That's one of the biggest reasons. Lincoln wants them to move, do something. He's took a big gamble with the Emancipation Proclamation, and if he does not get some victories to kind of back up that political and military stance, he says it was military necessity that he issued that Emancipation Proclamation. If he does not have the victories, then it doesn't have any teeth, as I like to say. So that's the other reason. That's one of the most important reasons. Lincoln is prodding them. But the other one is it's going to take Lee kind of off guard. Lee, again, has his force separated, knows that the Union Army might be on the move, but he's not expecting anything large to take place by this point. So those are the 2 main reasons. But you're exactly right. Winter campaigns are pretty odd. If we remember the year before, in 1861, there's no large military campaigns, at least not with the 2 major armies. And then 1863, we have a few, especially once we get into November, but by the time December rolls around, it kind of fades out again. But the winter of 62 sees some large scale battles. We get Fredericksburg, and then at the end of the month, we have Stones River. So they're both. The 1862 is a unique time. But 64 is also unique because we get Sherman's March to the Sea that's doing this, and Grant is also chipping away at Lee at Richmond and Petersburg. So yeah, it's an odd time, but one of the biggest reasons that it's happening in the wintertime against most military conventions is Lincoln's needing some victories.
Okay, if I recall right, Lee had about 75,000 men at Fredericksburg. After the casualties at Antietam, his army was around 26,000, I think. Where did he float with 50,000 men at that time?
I don't think his army was that low after Antietam. Plus, you've got men that are on leave; they're coming back to the army. In 1862 is a big draft year for the Confederacy. They've instituted the draft, so they're bringing in all kinds of troops. That way, the Partisan Ranger Act is also going into effect in 1862. So, and a lot of these partisan ranger groups, my ancestors included in that, they will be converted over to regular army troops sometimes. And so he's getting a huge influx of people. And we have to remember that while these armies are on campaign, and this is kind of the inner workings of Civil War armies, is that while these armies are on campaign, there are officers within those regiments that are going back home, and they're recruiting from those towns again, those states, and bringing more troops back in. So the army's continually growing as the campaigns are even going on. So Lee is able to increase his numbers substantially through conscription, but also simply through basic recruiting. And with Lee's wonderful victories in the Northern Virginia campaign with the Second Manassas, it's pretty easy to get people to join the army. Look, they're saying to their constituents, "Hey, we're winning." So the Confederacy is easily able to get a lot of recruits, especially for the Eastern campaigns.
Okay, these grand divisions. Tell me a little bit more about those. I mean, they just put 2 corps in them just to fluff. What was the point of that?
One reason is you can move them easier. It's
okay.
Instead of having, if you're aware of anything, and this goes back to not even military, but this is just if you're a manager at a McDonald's or something, having assistant managers and being able to communicate with fewer and fewer people is always a little bit better, and then they can pass the word on down. That was one of Burnside's biggest reasons for doing the grand divisions, is simply we need to communicate a little bit more effectively. And he's right. This would be a great idea, but he had so many enemies. If you got Hooker that's in there, and he's not confident in his own abilities, and with that much chain of command, you're going to have you may even have more miscommunication, and that's exactly what happens at Fredericksburg. So yes, having the corps system where just the 7 corps will answer to the one overall commander it can be tiresome for an army commander because he's having to be in contact with all 7 of these corps commanders. But you're going to be able to convey your orders a lot more effectively. It's not having to go through 2 people in order for the corps commander to know what to do. And if you listen to my Winfield Scott Hancock series that's currently going on right now, when he becomes a corps commander, you get the idea that corps are really running the Civil War armies. These are what are moving as a whole. And we see that with both Union and Confederate armies, but that was the intention. Kind of cut down on how many people you're having to communicate with. Maybe that'll make it a little bit easier to understand.
Okay, one more question, and this may be something you touched on. You may be about to go more in depth into the pontoon bridges. Why was there so much pushback, not wanting to give them? What was up with that?
One of the biggest reasons is they couldn't get the horses. He had ordered the pontoon bridges, but the horses weren't ready to take them, and so they were going to come partially by land and partially by water, and the horses that were supposed to transport them over land just were not. It wasn't synced up properly to get to bring them in. It's as simple as that. The horses weren't ready.
All right. Take us on.
All right. So by the time that that Burnside is able to secure a bridgehead, it's a miserable situation for many of these Union soldiers, especially the engineers who are trying to put this pontoon bridge together. We've all seen probably the movie Gods and Generals, where the Confederates, the Mississippians, are basically taking sharpshooting shots at the Union forces that are trying to lay out these pontoon bridges. And eventually the engineers just can't do it by themselves, and so they're sending in regiments that will, this is going into the jaws of death, but they're rowing across the river to attack the Confederates on the other side, and they're able to do it, but it takes a lot of good men, and it's not a pretty situation. But they are able to secure a bridgehead so they can lay out these pontoon bridges. There's 6 pontoon bridges. The ones that are in front of Fredericksburg get most of the attention because those are the ones that are very hotly contested. The ones in front of Jackson's lines, which is a little bit further to the south, it, the Union soldiers don't have too much trouble actually laying those pontoon bridges. The artillery from the Stafford Heights for the Union pretty much nullified any sharpshooters that were plaguing them too much. So the pontoon bridges weren't too bad of a situation for further south, but right there in the Fredericksburg area, it was miserable for the Union soldiers to be able to get across. But
Hey,
once they, yeah, go
okay,
ahead.
how long did by the time Burnside got his army there? How long did they wait for the bridges, and how long did it take them to actually get them laid and start getting regiments across?
It only took about a day to get the at least one pontoon bridge across, so you could get more troops across the river so that you could establish that bridgehead. So about a day
Okay.
to get one of the bridges across. Burnside is waiting. Um, let's let me calculate it up. It's about it's almost 2 weeks that
Wow.
that he's having to wait. Now he could have crossed a little bit earlier using forwards, and if he would have crossed by the November 26th, when some of these army commanders like General Hancock, who gets under Burnside's skin because Edwin Sumner has called together his grand division commanders, and he's getting their advice. What should they do? They know that Longstreet's entrenched on Mary's Heights, and they're going to be the ones that are going to be going across there. They say they don't think they can budge the Confederates from those heights. And Burnside hears about this, and he's pretty irritated that Sumner would call together these all these commanders kind of right under his nose, and not invite him to it. And so he invites all of his grand division commanders, including Hancock. And Hancock speaks up for himself, and Burnside does not like it. He basically says, "All I ask is for obedience to these orders." It's a very tense situation in the Union high command. But once the Union Army is able to finally ferry across, I mean, this is, like I said, it's taken. He could have crossed earlier, and with just Longstreet on the other side of the river. He's got over 100,000 men. He could have potentially actually defeated Lee's army in detail if he'd have moved earlier. And again, not all the pontoon bridges were there. The first pontoon bridges get there about I don't want to say any exact numbers because I'm not familiar with the exact days that it took to get the pontoon bridges down there, but um, he definitely had an easy opportunity, at least with one pontoon bridge, to get over before Jackson made it to the Confederate right.
We
And that,
talked about forwards. I'm sorry, forwards a
Mhm.
while ago, and I used to refight this battle a lot on computer games, and if I remember right, there was a ford on that river that was several miles up, and you could have came almost behind the Confederate lines. Your whole army on there. I mean, for any particular reason he didn't try to ford? I mean, other than just being stubborn?
Um, for one, he had already, well, one is, I think absolutely Burnside was extremely stubborn in this battle, but Lee would have simply just moved across the river there. It's Lee now, by that point, by the time he realizes that Lee has found out his plan and has already entrenched, if he moves, well, Lee's just going to simply move again. He might even have a harder time because Lee might even contest a crossing at a ford even more difficult, uh, more have more resistance of him crossing. So that's one reason he doesn't try the fords on upriver. And you're right, there's a bunch of fords on upriver where the Rapidan and the Rappahannock come together. But uh, when
So,
these go ahead.
I said, no, sorry, I didn't mean to keep throwing you off with the questions there when you was in the middle.
No problem. One of the plans. Well, let's just start with the plan that Burnside
Yeah.
has when he gets across the river. What is the plan that he's going to lay out here? The plan is for the Union right, the one that is attacking Stonewall Jackson on the Union left, the one that's going to be attacking Stonewall Jackson on the Confederate right, the southern end of the battlefield. That is going to be the main thrust. That William B. Franklin is going to take both of his corps and is supposed to assault Jackson on Prospect Hill and and turn Jackson's lines. On the Union right, the Confederate left, where Longstreet's stationed on Marye's Heights, there's supposed to be it's a very large diversion, but it was supposed to hopefully hold Longstreet in place to prevent him from supporting Jackson. So the attacks on the Union right are simply supposed to kind of hold Longstreet there while the main thrust comes on the Union left. That's the idea. When the order gets to William B. Franklin from Burnside and then gets passed down to General John Reynolds, who is the First Corps commander, they're already across the Rappahannock River. It simply says, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but it says, using no less than a division. What does that mean? Using no less than a division, you're supposed to attack these heights. This doesn't say both corps, doesn't say anything like this. It says using no less than a division. So these commanders interpret it as saying use a division. And George Meade, who has a division in the First Corps, is going to be assaulting Jackson's lines. And all due respect to George Meade, he will actually break Jackson's lines, which is it's kind of funny because Jackson will say, "My men have never have." I'm paraphrasing him, of course, but my men have failed to take a position, but we've never failed to hold a position. Well, he does not hold a position. His line actually breaks, and he's saved again by a bunch of A.P. Hill's men that come to his rescue. In that battle, um, Meade is trying to reorganize troops to be able to attack Prospect Hill, and one soldier actually turns his rifle on Meade. Is going to kill the division commander, and Meade will actually take his sword out and crack the gentleman over the head with it. Not kill him, but knock him down, knock him senseless, and make him go back into battle. It's a tough fight. Meade is a very stern commander, and his men really respect him too. But they actually break the line. I've actually got an animated battle map that shows that in great detail. And one thing, Jackson's lines were not connected. He had a brigade further in advance than another brigade. No wonder it broke. It wasn't properly set up. But they also had a lot of swampy areas on that part of the battlefield. And yeah, do you think they could have actually came up? That's one reason that Maxcy Gregg's South Carolinians kind of broke, is they didn't expect an attack to actually come in their front, because it was a big swampy area and they just didn't think it was possible. The Confederate gunners, the artillerymen that were on the Confederate right, the day before the attack happened, actually put out markers on the battlefield of how far, 300 yards were, 500 yards were, 800 yards were, so that when the Union Army got within those markers, they knew exactly which ammunition to use. I mean, that's a huge advantage for the Confederacy. And even before that, the First Corps attacks, before the John Reynolds actually moves out his first corps, he is halted for about an hour and a half by John Pelham. Pelham is General Jeb Stuart's one of Jeb Stuart's artillerymen. He takes one gun, hits the Union Army in the flank with that one gun, and stops the entire assault from happening for about an hour and a half. He
Wow.
fires a few shots and then moves. Eventually 50 Union cannons are turned against him, and he's still outperforming them. He shoots, he moves his gun to another location so that they can't find the range on him, and he holds them off for about an hour and a half until Jeb Stuart has to call him back about 3 times before he'll actually come back to the Confederate lines. So that prolongs the situation and really disheartens a lot of the Union soldiers. Most of them on the Union left do not even move from their position. It's mostly George Meade's division that goes in, and that's about it. There's a few others that attack, but it's George Meade's division that takes the brunt of the attacks. Now, most people know about the Union right. That's Marye's Heights. It's what everybody focuses on when they talk about Fredericksburg. It's what movies focus on when they show scenes of Fredericksburg. They hardly ever talk about the Confederate. Talk about Jackson's lines. They usually talk about Longstreet's. So again, this was supposed to be kind of a diversion. Although if they can take the heights they need to, it's mostly to hold Longstreet in place. But simplified it out, the Union attacks on the Union right were simply brigade after brigade goes in and attacks this stone wall and gets mowed down. Depending on how you count the attacks, there's somewhere around 16 attacks against Longstreet's line at that stone wall in Marye's Heights.
And brigades?
Of brigades. It's brigade level. They very rarely do they actually get more than a brigade to attack the stone wall at one time. Whether that's a lack of coordination or a misunderstanding of orders, it is usually just one brigade at a time, but it's about 16 attacks that take place that day. Like I said, depending on how you term attacks, if a brigade falls back and then they reattacks, do you count that twice, or is it just one attack by them? So around 16 attacks take place that day. It's a miserable situation. Instead of just going blow by blow, I mean, it's when the Union brigades are going up to that stone wall, there is what's called a swale, a dip in the landscape, which you can get when you go down into. You're safe from bullets. Now, artillery can fire over you and bust over top of your head, but the bullets you're pretty much safe from bullets. And so what happens is that swale gets full, or more full, as the brigades start going up there. They can't fall back they can't run all the way back to the city many times, so they go into that swale and just hopefully survive. That swale gets piled up with dead bodies at one point, and one brigade goes in and they can't get past the swale, which happens to most brigades. They get to the swale and they can't move past it. And one of the brigade commanders actually orders his men to pile the dead bodies up onto the crest. One thing to get them out of the swale so more men could get in there, but also just simply protect them. So they're piling up dead bodies. It is a horrific sight for these soldiers. And any particular thing you want me to discuss with the attack on Marye's Heights?
Yeah, I do. One thing, if you don't mind, I'd like you to touch on, if you don't care, about when the urban combat for a second, and then actually going up there to the heights. Can you just tell us what is it accurate, like what was going on through Gods and Generals, like, as they stood up there getting just blasted with the rifle fire?
Yeah, Gods and Generals does a pretty good job. I wish they would have showed it on a much broader scale, like understand what was happening, because it's hard to understand what they're exactly doing, but I think one of the best things they do is show the swell, which is when, if you remember, when Chamberlain is kind of, his men have to fall back and he's laying down in the swell. That's the swell. It's just a dip in the landscape. It's holding nearly thousands of men at that point. It seems like it depends on what point of the battle you're looking at, but holding thousands of men at some point. It's a very long swell, but they're running. They get up to somewhere around 100 yards in front of the stone wall. They fire until they just can't fire anymore. They're just taking too many casualties, and they have to fall back to the swell. And this happens repeatedly. Some just make it to the swell and don't go any further. At one point near the end, it's about 5 o'clock in the evening, and there's the first men who attacked was the Second Corps, and there's still men from the Second Corps in that swell. It's been like 7 hours, so that they have been in that swell, and they're yelling at this brigade that's coming up, "Don't go!" They're grabbing onto their uniforms and their pant legs, saying, "Don't go! It's murder! It's suicide to go up there." Yet they go anyway. It's one of the most heroic probably is Humphreys attack. It's one of the last attacks of the day. Humphreys is ordered to attack the stone wall, and he has two brigades with him. He attacks them brigade at a time, and he's on a horse riding up right up to the stone wall. Doesn't get hit. His horse gets hit. His horse, he gets extremely mad because he falls off his horse. His horse is killed, and he starts cussing the rebels because they had shot his $1,700 horse. And but he gets his men. He very, except for him being irate, he's very calm and cool and collected when he's ordered his men up there, and it's one of the more braver assaults that happened that day. Not that any of them weren't brave, but it was one of the ones that stand out. It's a very Gods and Generals has a pretty good representation of it. Like I said, I wish they would have showed it a little bit more broadly, so that you could understand what was happening brigade after brigade. But it's a devastating attack that happens. Now, you mentioned urban combat. Some historians have really classified it as the first urban combat that happens in world history, not just American Civil War history. And there's some scholars who have went in and actually sifted through all the records of the soldiers that were going basically house to house, and oddly enough, it really looks like what you would see in Afghanistan or Iraq, with soldiers giving hand signals of how many's going in, and you're going with little squads of men, sometimes 5 apiece, going into a house, making sure there's no one in there, because there could be someone on the roof as a sharpshooter, or what we use the term sniper today, and inflicting damage on the units going down the streets. And so you're having to check out every single house inside the town just to make sure that there's no one that's no enemy in each house. It's a pretty amazing sight. And when you kind of envision Civil War soldiers performing tasks that our modern military is now doing, it's an amazing thing to know that was not only unique to American history, but unique to world history.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that I've liked studying about that particular battle is, I don't think they do enough of touching on, is the urban combat. I mean, they've never experienced this before, walking through there in parade formation, and all of a sudden you're getting sniped at from all over the place.
Yeah, and when we talked last time about my dissertation, to step out of the fortifications in Appalachia, sometimes that meant death, because there would be, guerrillas, the GUER guerrillas, irregular forces that would be hiding out in the woods. And if you went outside of those fortifications, you're liable to get shot, just and never know it. It's a scary feeling to know that death is that ever present on the battlefield. And it's the same thing that they're feeling there in the streets of Fredericksburg, is that anxiety of marching down those streets and knowing that there could be something around every corner. And these squads of Union soldiers are clearing out these houses as they're trying to go down the street. It's really remarkable. I think George Rabel does a pretty good job of explaining that in his book called Fredericksburg.
Now, kind of a both side question here. During these attacks, can you take us through the minds of what's going on between the brigades that's going up there after seeing the slaughter, what the Confederates are thinking as they slaughter each brigade, and then the command structure from both staff as Burnside's watching this debacle unfold, and Lee and his commanders have got to be just, I mean, I don't know, frothing, I guess, at the mouth, like wolf feeding on their prey. I mean, is that too much? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, most of these soldiers knew it was going to be a suicidal assault even before that they even stepped foot on that field. What a lot of people don't realize, and that really I hadn't put it together until I read some good books on it, was that there is a little canal, what they call a mill race, between the field and the town. So you go through the town, you cross over the mill race. Now the Confederates, being very smart in their actions, don't destroy the bridges entirely, but they take up the planks to the bridges that go over the mill race. So the soldiers are having to scoot by on what's called the stringers, and eventually commanders just forfeit the bridges and tell them just go down into the canal on the mill race and come on out to the other side. So they're getting cold and wet as they're going in. Most of these commanders know it's a suicidal attack, and after around 7 hours of fighting, they know that nothing's going to be gained from this. Some commanders actually think they might be able to do it. There's a few out there that stand out as being these very robust and think my brigade can do it, but most of them look back and think it's suicide. Now, at one point, Hooker will ride to Burnside's headquarters and tell him that it is to stop the attacks. There needs to be no more bloodshed. We cannot turn this line. Stop the attacks now. And Burnside refuses. Now, it's probably out of stubbornness and partially out of he doesn't know what's going on. He does know that there's no more attacks happening on his left. Reynolds has not moved. William B. Franklin they've made their assault and then they've pulled back. They haven't went any further. And so Burnside says, since we don't have them attacking, we can use more troops to attack Mary's Heights again. And this ends in the last few brigades that are used to attack Mary's Heights. Burnside just will not give up. And I think it may be stubbornness, but a lot of it, he didn't know what the situation was. He was just hearing about it. He was not actually seeing a lot of it. Although eventually he will. I don't think initially he knew what was going on. He will be so overcome with what he has done. The next day, he said he would lead his own old Ninth Corps in an attack himself against those heights. Kind of almost wanting to commit suicide himself because of what he has done to everybody else. His grand division commanders will talk him out of it, but he's actually thinking seriously of leading his entire corps against the line, kind of in a redemption kind of way, to pay for what he had done. Burnside was stubborn at the time, but he realized he made a huge mistake in ordering those attacks. The Confederates are kind of flabbergasted that so many attacks are coming and they're not materializing anything. They know they can't. They have great artillery. They actually are concerned because they're running out of ammunition. That's their biggest concern, is that they are running out of ammunition. The reason they're bringing up reinforcements is not because they're scared their line is going to break, as much as they're needing more troops with more ammunition to fire. Eventually, a bunch of Lee's artillery on Marye's Heights will stop firing completely because they have ran out of ammunition. I mean, and that's um, a sobering thought. Sobering thought that the Union soldiers, they're getting fired on as they're in the town. Even they're marching through the town, they're still getting fired on the entire way across this field. And the as far as I know, the Confederates on the left, they didn't put out the markers like the ones on the right did of how far they were, but it still played havoc on the Union lines. Lee is amazed that they're making these attacks again. Well, when Lee is kind of forming up his battle lines, even up until the day that Burnside attacks, he didn't think Burnside was going to attack. Who would attack such a well-entrenched enemy on high ground out in the open? He was actually convinced that, I won't say convinced. He thought it was a great possibility that Burnside would simply pull back and not attack that day. But that's one time Lee was very wrong when he tried to read somebody. He's usually good at reading people. He was not good at that day. He did not realize that Burnside was going to issue so many assaults against that impregnable line. So
you said a while ago
Yeah,
sorry, that Burnside wasn't aware of what's going on. Oh, there's a painting I seen that shows him up there watching it. So Burnside wasn't viewing this carnage taking place.
He was watching him. Now he's got his concerns all over the battlefield.
Okay.
Again, he's an Army commander. Yeah, he's watching it, but because he's not that close to the action, he doesn't know the magnitude of what's happening.
Yeah.
And he's hearing about all these brigades and these divisions that are getting repulsed. And I'm trying to read his mind. I don't. Hopefully, I'm doing him justice. He thinks that they're just not putting in enough effort to do this. And even the lower ranking commanders are trying to figure out a way to turn these lines. But Marye's Heights, you have to remember, this is not the end of the Confederate line. There are more Confederates to the left. So if you try to turn the stone wall at Marye's Heights, you could be attacked in the rear. When you do so, it's a scary situation. Couch, General Couch, General Howard, and General Hancock are in Fredericksburg as their units are going up, and they're trying to figure out, maybe could we swing around to the right? Howard initially is near the right side of the stone wall, but again, if he attacks the stone wall and even breaks it, he might be attacked from the rear. There's really nothing left to do but go straight up that hill. You could move further to the right, but again, you're going to be away from a lot of other troops. It's a weird situation for the Union commanders, but I don't believe Burnside understood the magnitude of what was happening. So again, trying to read someone's mind 160 years ago, but he's definitely not aware of everything.
Union Brigade that made this attack, like an average, what kind of casualty rates you looking at? 50, 60%, 70?
I just ran through the numbers last week in preparation because I'm animating the entire Marye's Heights battle.
Oh wow! I can't wait for
So it's going to be in 3 parts. I'm going to animate it, and so 2 parts are already done. I'm working on the 3rd right now. Oddly enough, it's not as bad as you think. It's about 25% is the average. About 25% casualties from each brigade that goes up there. Now, some are larger, some are a little bit smaller, but the average is about 25% casualty rate. The Second Corps, I'm trying to remember, is lost somewhere around 5,000 men. The Second Corps is going to have by itself somewhere around between 15 and 20,000 men. So that's about right, about 25% roughly. So
much higher.
Yeah, and when I don't know if you've seen my video on how deadly was Pickett's charge. Pickett's charge, those casualties run, between 50 and 60%.
What was going through my mind right then?
Yeah. So it's definitely a lot. Pickett's charge on the brigade level is a lot deadlier, but Mary's Heights is extremely traumatic to these soldiers. Many of them some of them have never even seen battle before. Uh, that's one thing in Gods and Generals it shows is that the 20th Maine, this is the first time they were actually entering a major battle. They've fought in some minor stuff, but this is the first major battle they're in. Um, Expecting new recruits like that to overcome such a big disadvantage is, I don't think it can be. It's could hardly ever be done, even
Any
with
reason why?
veterans.
Oh, I'm sorry. Any reason why that you think the numbers were so much higher in Pickett's charge than that one?
I think one reason is that swell, because some of them, many of them made it to that swell, which, depending on which side of the battle you're on, you're anywhere from 200 to 400 yards away from the stone wall. So you're got pretty good protection. And you can fire back at the enemy at that point. And that swell actually protected a lot of men. They and again, that's probably the reason why the walk between Fredericksburg and Mary's Heights and Seminary Ridge and Cemetery Ridge is kind of comparable, but having that well, even though we say that 25% is the average, there was a lot more soldiers killed or wounded or captured at Mary's Heights. I didn't want to just wanted to clarify that because I know someone might be confused at that. There's a lot more soldiers went into the fight at Mary's Heights than they did at Pickett's Charge. So, yeah, I think that swell actually saved a lot of them.
Something about which caught my attention. You mentioned something about having a green soldier go in there as far as a veteran. And that got me thinking, wouldn't it almost be easier to have a green soldier do this because they don't know what they're expecting as opposed to somebody who's already done something? I mean, they're probably already suffering from PTSD, know what they're going into. This guy's going up here, bright-eyed and glory-filled.
I can see where you're coming from, but I'm putting together part 11 of William Winfield Scott Hancock's biography, and by the end of the Overland Campaign, or by the time they reach Petersburg and Richmond, they have a lot of green troops. These green troops are, let's just say, they do not perform well. Hancock is desperate for the old veterans of his army, but there's been so many lost by the end of that campaign that they had to resupply it with new recruits, and he requested just time to drill these men as well as possible. But nothing is better than a good veteran for a fight, no matter how many battles they've been in, because it's just that they know what to expect, and they're not going to be the ones overwhelmed by what's going to appear to them in battle.
Well, for y'all, I know I asked a bunch of questions there. So I hope I didn't derail you too bad.
No, you're fine. I was wrapping up anyway. That's there's some fighting that goes on besides Mary's Heights and Prospect Hill, particularly some in the center where there's lots of where the railroad cuts through, and also there's a little bit of a swamp there. Not much of significance, but still some fighting, and again the fighting through the town. But the major attacks are on Prospect Hill and Mary's Heights. It's a horrible fight for the Union. They will lose a significant amount of men. The estimates are nearly 13,000 men killed, wounded, and captured and missing for the Union Army. The Confederates lose around 5,000 killed, wounded, and captured. So it's extremely one-sided. When Lincoln hears the news that what's happened to the Union Army. He says, my God, what will the country say?" He was very concerned. What was the country going to say to so many horrible casualties after he's already issued the Emancipation Proclamation? His fears will be assuaged once he gets to once Stones River happens by the end of the month. He's happy that someone has delivered him a victory. But by December 15th, when all this is wrapped up, it's a bleak time for the Union at the end of 1862. But again, 13,000 casualties for the Union, only about 5,000 for the Confederacy. Handily, Lee has thwarted any attempt to invade towards Richmond.
One question, further touched on a little bit earlier a while ago. We talked about it. When you talk about Burnside surveying the field, and we talked about Jackson's left, and they actually broke it. I remember one time in Gods and Generals when Lee saying that about turning the flank. I mean, did they actually really come close to breaking it full on, or was it just momentarily when Meade's brigade did it?
Meade's brigade did it, but they didn't have enough support to actually make it effective. If there would have been, instead of just one division attacking and they had plenty of troops on that side of the river, it wouldn't have been no problem to have sent more in. If there would have been a follow-up right behind Meade, Jackson's line probably could have been turned completely. I mean, it was that close. And one division had done this against Jackson's men. Again, they were kind of caught off guard. Maxcy Gregg did not expect an attack to hit him. It was just the ground was too rough in front of him, and he thought that he would be able to see it coming from pretty great distance away, but they got surprised. So yeah, if a little bit would have been put forward and the orders would not have been miscommunicated, Fredericksburg could have been a lot different battle, I do believe.
So what time during the battle, I guess it was probably later in the afternoon or something, when Lee made his quote about war being growing too fond of war?
Not some. I'm trying to remember when exactly he said. I'm not sure exactly when the statement was made, but it was around the time of Fredericksburg. There's actually a wonderful article about that starts out quoting Lee on that. It says, it's a good thing war is so terrible, or we should grow too fond of it. But why do we love talking about the Civil War? Why do we love writing about it? It's so horrible, all the blood and death. And so it goes into our fascination with the war and our fascination with death and the war itself. It's a fascinating article.
Love it. You're right. People are fascinated with gore. I mean,
they are, and it's the same thing with like horror movies. People love scary movies. They want to, for some reason, many people are fascinated with it. In grad school, we always say that the people that are, let's say, people who focus on genocide are you just put them over in the corner. They're a little bit different characters than the rest of us. But some people would say that about Civil War historians too. We have to understand death quite a lot. I understand death in the context of war because it's ever present in the Civil War. It's always there.
Can you take us through the night where the Union troops are laid up there in the cold and what they're thinking, and the dead bodies freezing?
Yeah, that's a brutal moment. Probably one of the best people to actually give an account of it is Joshua Chamberlain, and they're stuck in that swale. And they go through a night. The next day they are fighting, and they're actually there for about 2 nights. And right before they are ordered to leave the field, they decide that they're not going to leave the field until their friends, their comrades, are buried. And so they're going to try to bury them at night. And about the time they're going to be burying their comrades, the skies open up and the aurora borealis, the northern lights, actually provide enough light for them to bury their dead. It's an amazing moment in military history, and just an amazing moment in American history that happens just at the right moment. But they are recalled. They're stuck in. It's for one thing, they've gotten cold from running through the mill race into the cold water. The entire field is completely muddied up from so many men marching across it. They're stuck in the swell overnight, and it's freezing cold. It's a cold rain that happened the day before the battle begins, and there's so many dead bodies laying around. There's at least one in the movie Guys and Generals. They actually make it be Tom that uncovers Joshua Chamberlain's face, like uncovers him thinking he's dead. In reality, that does happen in real life, but it was probably someone that was trying to rob the dead. And so Chamberlain's laying there with someone else's coat kind of partially over his face, and the man takes it off and gets scared half to death because there's a pair of eyes looking right back at him. But um, yeah, the situation that they are actually there for, essentially 2 nights, and finally are recalled back to Fredericksburg, and then they're recalled out. At least the 20th Maine is, and a few other regiments are sent back into the field that they had just came from, um, before they eventually are recalled all the way back across the Rappahannock.
I can't remember. I may have this confused with another battle, but is this the one where Chamberlain almost gets captured by some Confederates and uses a Confederate voice, or changes to a Southern voice when he's talking back to them?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know
Okay.
if I don't think that was here that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was there or not. Tell us about which one of my favorite stories. It's got to be everybody's of the Angel of Mary's Height.
The Angel of Mary's Heights, and forgive me, I cannot remember his name.
I can't recall his name.
I've lost his name, but the Angel of Mary's Heights. It's a Confederate soldier who, during the battle, will go out and actually give water to the Union soldiers. And the fact that he doesn't get shot by either side, he goes out in the middle of a hail of bullets and is able to do his do his calling of actually protecting the soldiers, or giving them aid. I just looked up his name, Richard Kirkland, the Angel of Mary's Heights. But he just could not stand that so many people were crying out on the battlefield. They were in such great pain, and simply some of them just needed a drink of water just to ease their pain, ease them through the night. And I love the fact that he did this while the battle is going on in some parts. He does a lot at night, but actually does it while the battle's going on. And that both sides kind of respect what he's doing, so they don't fire back at him. That's just a beautiful story. Unfortunately, he will die at the Battle of Chickamauga, and that's sad that someone with such a big heart, someone wanted to give to humanity, is now passes away during the war. To be a good story, I guess it's a Greek tragedy, but to be a good story, you'd think he might have survived and went on to better things, but unfortunately, no.
So, Burnside, when this is over with, I mean, when he's leaving his army, I mean, guessing he's depressed to realize what he's done. I mean, is he for his resignation then? Is Lincoln take it away? I mean, what's going to happen to Ambrose Burnside here?
He gets taken away from him. He's ready to lead his 9th Corps against the Confederate Army himself, kind of a suicidal attack. His commanders convince him not to, and he will move on down to, he will move up to those fords that we were talking about earlier that are on up the river, and it's called Burnside's Mud March. His men will, that's the reason you don't move in the wintertime. It gets wet. And so the soldiers try to move out, it turns into just a horrible mess of trying to move wagons, artillery, and soldiers that doesn't materialize. But he was going to try to move around Robert E. Lee's army, and before it can really get anywhere, he is replaced by Joseph Hooker. So Lincoln does replace him. And because of Hooker taking over, a couple of soldiers will actually resign. One of them being Edwin Sumner, the commander of the Right Grand Division that was under Burnside. He will leave because of Joseph Hooker. Darius Couch will leave. He was commander of the Second Corps. He will leave because of Burnside and what he did there, and a little bit of not wanting to be under the command of Hooker either. So he will get that taken away from after that debacle of the Mud March that happens just a little bit after the Battle of Fredericksburg.
Burnside removes his army. I know this would have probably been difficult just where Lee's position's at, but I know he still had some. Burnside had some fresh units, but does Lee offer any type of pursuit, like with cavalry or anything? Any type of rear guard actions taking place?
Once the army is across the river, there's really nothing he can do.
Got it.
Yeah, now Jackson does suggest a counterattack, but ultimately Lee doesn't do that. Now Jackson does offer a counterattack during the battle when his line is broken. He's able to throw more troops into that break, pushes George Meade and the other Union troops back. He will attack. He sends a few brigades out to pursue after the Union forces, but either he didn't realize it or thought he could overpower them. There was plenty of Union troops. Most of the First Corps and the other corps in the Grand Division, the Left Grand Division, was already across that river, and they got butchered. The brigades that were sent across that field in the counterattack that Stonewall did launch, not the grand one that he wanted to do later, but the one right after he reassembled his line, his men got destroyed. I mean, those were some high casualty rates that he withstood by sending those troops into battle. It was a miserable counterattack, but Jackson thought when you got them on the run, you got to keep pushing them. Like I said, either he didn't realize or had overconfidence of his men, but he tried to counterattack and it did not end well with him.
Hey, in these grand divisions, I forgot to ask this question a while ago. It was two corps commanders or two corps made up of a division. Now, did he pick somebody different to command this grand division, or did one of the corps commanders command both the corps and the grand division?
No, he picked different men to command the grand divisions.
Okay.
These were senior corps commanders that had experience with large bodies of men. Essentially, these were their own armies. Nearly, these grand divisions were an army in of themselves. So yeah, they were chosen from very respected corps commanders were given command of the grand divisions. Joseph Hooker will dismantle that. He won't keep that once he takes command.
That sounds like a good idea though, because instead of talking, I know we talked about this earlier about chain of command. You're talking to three people, instead of 6, 7.
Exactly. I think it's a good idea, but again, with that added person, it allows for miscommunication to happen. So you got the good and the bad. It's a catch-22. Danged if you do, danged if you don't.
Now, back a few minutes ago, I want to touch on this again with some of the urban warfare in there. It was just Barksdale's Mississippians, I believe, that was in there. How much worse could this have been if he had two brigades in there? Could it have prevented them from getting through the town?
Possibly. No, I really don't. I wish I knew Lee's mentality toward putting troops down there, but if you'd have had more troops than simply Barksdale's Mississippians, which he had a few others down there, but Barksdale's made up the majority of them. And if he would have had 2 or 3 brigades down there, how much damage could they have done? Quite a bit, but they did run the risk of getting cut off. if the Union Army does come down there very quickly. So again, you got good and bad out of there.
They never experienced stuff like that, what they were doing. And I'm fascinated by the urban warfare aspect of it. Battle.
I think there's actually a historian that's putting a book together right now that is talking about the urban warfare of Fredericksburg. If when it comes out, I'll definitely tell you about it and give you a link to where you can get it at, because I'm interested in getting that book too, so we can know a little bit more about what went on in that urban landscape that again, it's unique to world history.
Yeah, never. I mean, you said these guys are marching in parade formation. They're not expecting to be, hell of bullets raining down on them from all over these buildings. I mean, it had to be just shock and awe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we find that if you read This Republic of Suffering by Drew Kilp and Faust, the anxiety that these soldiers went through when you have sharpshooters and what we call snipers today hiding in the woods, and you can be sitting around a campfire and your friend get killed right next to you. That's a horrible sense of anxiety that these soldiers were having to go through. And this adds a new element to it when you're now going into a city where normally you feel safe. Outside of warfare, you feel safe inside of a city. And again, you're not, no major city was, and can you call Fredericksburg a major city? Probably not. But, having, there was some fighting in and around the town of Sharpsburg. A few troops went inside the town, but at least enemy troops went inside of fought inside the town, but it was not on a large scale. This is really the first time we see it at a large scale that's happening in definitely the Civil War, but on a in general in the scope of the entire world, we don't see that. We don't see that like we do in Fredericksburg.
The inhabitants of the city, they left it, or are they hunkered down, hiding?
George Rabel said that eh, he gave an estimate that only 4 civilians actually died of Fredericksburg, which says that most of them were either had evacuated the city, and the ones who didn't actually sought cover and were able to withstand the bombardment.
So you took
But the houses did get looted.
They did or did not?
They did.
You took us through the Union side and the dismay by Lincoln. Can you take us through the Confederate command and the Jefferson Davis, what they were thinking after this battle? I mean, we won the war. They're going to quit. What were they thinking?
Well, let's back up just a little bit to Lee was concerned that Burnside might make it across the Rappahannock River before he got there. That was a legitimate concern, especially if the pontoon bridges had got to Burnside when they were supposed to. He could have made it across the river before Lee could have gotten there, so Fredericksburg wouldn't have happened. Lee was wanting to pull back to the North Anna River, and but Jefferson Davis actually told him no. You need to keep him as far north as you possibly can. Don't get that close to Richmond. So once Lee is able to defeat them at Fredericksburg, I mean, this is a joyful time for the Confederacy. It's not that they won the war, but they definitely see that the victory at Fredericksburg has boosted the morale of the country and brought them just a little bit, actually a lot closer to independence. If they can continue to do stuff like this. And Lee has won. Well, he's pushed McClellan off the peninsula and actually defeats, because McClellan actually pulls back during these battles. So 7 days, Lee is able to push McClellan off the peninsula. He's able to defeat Pope at Second Manassas. He moves up the Shenandoah Valley, goes to the Battle of Antietam, where basically ends in a draw, but he has to withdraw back across the river, and now he wins this wonderful victory. The entire second half of the 1862 has been on a point system, for like a boxing terms. It's been a victory for the Confederacy. it's looking great for them. Now in the West, it's looking bad, but most of the focus is on the East. European observers are looking at the East, what's happening in the East with these two capitals, and the Confederacy took this victory at Fredericksburg as meaning that they were a lot closer to independence than they were at the middle of 1862. So when we look at Fredericksburg, we can't just look at it alone. We have to look at the entire war itself, entire war during 1862 combined. The Confederacy is riding high and living high on the hog by December 1862.
If you said North Anna, if he crossed there and before Lee got there, that's before Lee would have fell back through the North Anna.
That was the plan. Fall back to the North Anna.
So I'm guessing that would have been a lot more favorable to. I mean, would that have forced Lee to try to maneuver and attack Burnside? I mean, or did he have a good defensive position there?
Yeah, he could have put up a really good defensive position there. It would have been well, not as good as Fredericksburg, I don't believe, but
Yeah.
yeah, he definitely could have thrown up positions. Um, Dr. Earl Hess, one of my professors at Lincoln Memorial University, uh, actually wrote a book on entrenchments during the Civil War, actually two books, and very early on, Confederate and Union soldiers realized how valuable just throwing up any kind of barrier is to the safety of your unit. And so Lee's Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of the Potomac were masters at entrenchments. By this is 1862, so it's still fairly early, but they're still really good at throwing up any kind of fortification very quickly. Sometimes just using bayonets and hands to throw up dirt, but they're still really good at what they do. And Lee could have easily put up a good defense, no matter where he was at. I think Lee's a pretty good defensive commander, um, especially once you look at the overland campaign. He knows when to attack, and he doesn't get baited into things as easily as another commander might.
I'm kind of bouncing around here, but keep you these different thoughts. So you talked about a while ago running out of ammunition. Was that what they was kind of portraying in Gods and Generals when they showed the Confederates reloading the muskets and handing them up to the men, passing them up to the front?
Yeah. Well, that makes it a lot more streamlined. Um, you're getting awful lot more shots, and so yeah, you're running out of ammunition a lot quicker at that. General Kershaw's men are brought up. Some North Carolinians are brought up. It's Cobb's Georgians are the first troops that are at the stone wall that are being attacked, and very quickly into the fight. Basically, after the Second Corps has attacked Mary's Heights, they're running low on ammunition, and so that's why you see Kershaw South Carolinians and Ransom's Tar Heels move in, simply because they're running low on ammunition, and because it's a very fast rate of fire.
Go back to the soldiers of all that's doing the attack. I mean, we talked about that in Gods and Generals. I mean, the commanders that you see the guys jumping around, keep loading. I mean, were they managed? I mean, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to ask this. I mean, I guess composure they must have had is people are just dropping around them and they're telling them, close it up, man, keep firing. I mean, I can't believe they held them together that long.
Well, it depends on which brigade you're talking about, especially some of those green troops that hadn't been in the battle. They broke up even before they got to the swale. They ran back. That's a scary moment. There's a few regiments, the 2nd Maryland, they go into an unfinished railroad cut and will not come out. They refuse to go any further. They don't want to go out. They don't want to go and attack, and so they just stop right there. And that happens to a couple of them. So yeah, it's many of them don't contain their composure. Yes, they take off running as soon as they get into the thick of the fight. That's not saying all of them. Most of them do their duty, but they realize quickly once they get up and face that stone wall, and the Confederates are so well protected, they quickly understand they've got to fall back to that swale to save their life.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. 'Cause it was something I forgot to ask you earlier. Got a minute here. Tell us a little about the Irish Brigades in this.
The Irish Brigades is this is part of General Hancock's division, the Second Corps. So they're some of the first troops that actually go into battle. The Irish Brigade is, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what they specifically do. They are they're running up against what a lot of people kind of pick out of the Irish Brigade is that they're going up against some Irishmen that are from Georgia. And so having men from the same country are actually fighting against one another in a different country is a weird experience, because they both, you think someone that come from similar backgrounds would have a same political view or same views on economics or anything like this, but you do see the diversity in in the Irish and their beliefs, and but also one in their conscripts, because like I said, conscription is also a thing as well. What are you fighting for? And that kind of brings up a lot of questions about the Irishmen that are from different states and now fighting against one another and on different sides. Um, the Irish Brigade does make it up to the stone wall within about 50 to 100 yards within it. They're unable to hold out too long. Most of these brigades are told that there's going to be reinforcements coming up. One of these brigades is the Irish Brigade. They're supposed to be the ones going up and supporting the other ones, but by the time they get up to the swale, the men that they went up to support have already fell back to the swale, and there they go up to the stone wall and they get butchered and they have to fall back to the swale. It's just a reoccurring theme with every single brigade that goes up. You go up, you fire, and you fall back, and it happens over and over and over again.
So was Gods and Generals anywhere accurate? They're really facing each other, two Irish unit or two Irish brigades?
Not Irish brigades, but just that there were men from Ireland in those Georgia units. Yeah.
Okay.
Unlike the Union Brigade, which was made up predominantly of all Irishmen.
Yeah, well, I got to think about one of the, I guess probably my favorite quote in Gods and Generals. I remember when they're getting ready, the 20th Maine to go up there, and I think Tom says something about the soldiers in front will make the walk shorter, and Buster says, begging your pardon, sir, but the only thing made shorter by those up front is their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Something to that effect.
I like that. I like that quote. I don't know. Of course, the movies have some artistic license to work with, but yeah, I think most soldiers knew that something bad was going to happen on that trip, and no matter what line you were in, whether you're in the first line or the second line, it was not going to be pretty. And the 20th Maine, when their brigade moves out, they're actually in front. There's a regiment behind them, and then there's two regiments to the right of them. The two regiments to the right of them, they're both New York regiments. They do not hear the bugle call for them to go into battle. So when the 20th Maine goes in, the 83rd Pennsylvania and a Michigan regiment are far ahead on their left. They're still part of the brigade, but they're far ahead. They're having the 20th Maine and the regiment behind them are having to go through fences, which is slowing them down. And the other regiment didn't even hear the call to go into battle. And so you've got this mangled mess of Stockton's brigade, which has no cohesion. The regiments go in piecemeal and they get slaughtered even worse than if they'd went in as a brigade. So that's a serious flaw in the command structures, is that because they were ordered in by a bugle call, and that depends on if you can hear the bugle call or know it's for you, which is a little well, it's a little scary, especially if you're a commander trying to get your men to move.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm just trying to imagine getting that bugle call under all the sounds of battle. Yeah, probably a lot of things there. Trying to think of something else. I guess this is kind of off the top. I just can't believe how Lee didn't learn anything from that battle. Just a few later. Going in trench positions. Let's see. I think that's pretty much the only questions I have, unless there's anything else you wanted to add to it. Maybe we didn't cover.
No, I think we covered everything.
I know a little bit longer than usual, but I had so many. I never had so many questions. I didn't mean to keep you so long on it.
No, it's fine. I enjoyed talking about Fredericksburg. It's one of the more misunderstood battles because you hear most people only know about Mary's Heights. They don't know about Prospect Hill.
Yeah, I didn't know that much about it. I did got to think about something. It's just when in Gettysburg, when they turned the line back, they're yelling Fredericksburg. Who was that? The Irish that was yelling that?
No, that was it's part of the Second Corps, but that would have been. Let me get it in my head. Who was yelling? Well, it'd been the whole entire Union line along there. So it'd been Carroll, Gibbon, and Hayes's men that were. Those brigades were the ones. The Irish Brigade had already been kind of put off to the reserve. They were in Caldwell's division, not Caldwell's division. Yeah, Caldwell's division.
So the men they were involved in the attack.
They were on the second day, and so they were kind of held back on the third day. The ones that yelling Fredericksburg was Hayes' division and Gibbon's division.
Okay.
Mostly.
And then there's another line in Gettysburg. I really couldn't figure out what Lee was talking about when he says Colonel Alexander's in charge of the artillery. He's very good. Expect to break them up like he did at Fredericksburg. I guess the only thing he's talking about is when the men were attacking. Because I don't know what he was talking about. Because breaking them up, because there wasn't a line there or stonewall for them to break.
I think he's just referring to the battle lines of men that were on Cemetery Ridge. Even though they were behind a stone wall, there's still battle lines there, so hopefully can break them up. And there were some artillery batteries that made it across the river and were set up on the outskirts of Fredericksburg, firing back at Mary's Heights.
Really, I didn't know that.
It wasn't the best situation. They were pretty much out in the open, and the Confederates had the range on them, but they were still able to hold their own sometimes. Many were thrown back, but there are a few that actually stayed on the outskirts of Fredericksburg during those assaults.
We talked about the battle plan earlier. I know, like I said, I used the computer game, and that's not always really what's going on. But I think in that what it was talking about, because when I turned those lines, you able to surround the entire Confederate Army after that. So if they had to turn that line, they could have rolled them up.
They could have. It would have been if Jackson's line would have been broke. He still had plenty of men behind, so it would have had to have been a concerted effort. And if Burnside would have been more clear in his orders, that would have been the entire Grand Division would have moved forward. So it definitely could have been done, but it would have been a very tough fight on top of Prospect Hill. I think that would have been what the battle is mostly known for, would be the fighting on top of Prospect Hill when Jackson's probably going to be throwing in every division he's got trying to hold them off.
Oh, yeah, I have another question after this. Is this where Burnside gets sent to the Western Division now?
Yes. After this, Burnside is sent to the West. He's sent to Ohio first. And he's actually going to arrest some people because the writ of habeas corpus has been suspended. He's going to arrest some people that's speaking out against the Union. And then by August of 1863, he's going to be moving in his East Tennessee campaign that we talked about last time.
Okay. Well, that was really good. I think it's maybe one of the best videos. I really enjoyed that one. Sorry for keeping you so long.
No, it's fine.
Want to do Stones River out because we do something else, or is there something else you want to do next time?
Let's save Stones River for a little bit deeper into December.
Okay.
Once we get um, trying to think what would be a good one for next time.
I think about something too. I mean, I don't know how long the video would be. About what they did for Christmas and Thanksgiving, or
Yeah, I've actually got a video on that on Christmas, but
first, I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
I think I could come up with a few articles to read for that. Um, let me let me see what I can dig up with kind of celebrating holidays with these Civil War armies and see what we can find.
it kind of be neat for just something different and for the people to probably enjoy. It's often wondered, like during that time, I was saying this the other day. How often did some of these other commanders get to break away and go back home? I know because it wasn't that far, but how often did they get to go home for a day or so?
Yeah, for the furlough system is actually Hooker does a really good job of um, reforming the furlough system. The soldiers really liked Hooker for his ability to let them go home on time and at a set moment in time, so they knew that they were going to get a break.
And y'all saying about something too. And you brought back up earlier. I was thinking about a video on because I've seen some stuff on it about the dead and how many people would it take to bury them and how long did that take? Because I was thinking about like Gettysburg, with all that dead. How many people would it take to bury that many people? I mean,
And a lot of times the townspeople are having to bury them.
God, I mean that. You dig a six. I just it seemed like it would take it forever.
Mm-hmm. And again, most, especially for the Confederates at Gettysburg, you throw them into a mass grave.
Yeah, and I mean, I just can't. I mean, I don't know how long it take just with a shovel out there trying to dig up a ground in the summertime. I can't imagine what it'd be like in Fredericksburg with the ground frozen. Put that dead in there. And say I was thinking about another one too the other day. It's kind of I was getting out of the shower and I was thinking, well, I wonder how long the men had to go without showering, and then when they were out there in the battle, I mean, what they do with all the waste? I mean, that just seems like, I know it sounds gross, but this is something I was thinking about. What happened to all
that? Well, General Early actually established some latrines after first Manassas. That was a big problem that they were having with hygiene and people getting sick, and so after first Manassas, um, they immediately recognized we have got to get these men to understand where they need to build latrines and where they need to use the bathroom instead of doing it in camp, which was where they were doing it.
Yeah, no, 30,000 men. Okay, so General, yeah, because that was I get weird thoughts like that. I bet that was just some very very gross. And then I guess the showering thing did too, because when in the army, we have to go certain so many days without showering. I got thinking, God, I bet these guys went months without that.
Yeah, I'd have to even look it up. I know if they had the ability, they would, but especially in the winter months, you would not have seen a soldier getting a bath just because it's cold.
Oh no, yeah, I can see that. I had I get so many these thoughts on my mind about stuff. What they went through. One thing I posted something the other day, video. I've had so much dental work done before, and last night I was brushing my teeth and a partial filling came out. I got to go have it refixed. But I got to think about. I've had it in there for 20 years, and part of it came out, so it wasn't a big deal. But I got thinking about God, what it must have been like back then for a tooth to go bad. I mean, I can't imagine them having to pull a tooth with no numbing agent or drilling or like they do today.
Have to go to a barber. They'd be the ones that do it for you.
Dennis told me a while back, she's there, she was cleaning my teeth, and she said, well, no, she's a hygienist. I'm sorry, she's a little bit older lady, and she was talking about in the late 70s, she was working at this place, and there was a man then, just cleaning his teeth, and he's in his 90s, and she said he still had all of his teeth, and I was like, really? And she said, yeah. She said, well, people born back then, they weren't drinking the sweet drinks and sugary stuff that people do today, and they had that water had more fluoride in it, so they actually had better longevity of their teeth than what happens today. And I was like, really? And I would not have thought.
Yeah, I mean, my mama, she's 91, and she didn't have a cavity until she was, I think, in her 70s.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing, because I've got had $30,000 in dental work done. And every one of my teeth got crowns and bridges and everything else on them. And I guess that's what comes from all those sugary drinks and stuff that we eat today.
Yeah, I've stopped drinking any kind of soda pop back in 2014. So I that's one reason my dentist likes me. They don't have to do too much work when I come in.
Well, I've drank too many of them this weekend. I've cut a lot of them out, because I was drinking 8-10 a day. I've changed it with chocolate milk now, which they got the many sugars in it. It's got to be better for me. 10 Dr. Peppers. Those things are just poison in a can.
They are.
But I guess that's I'm sorry to keep you so late. I know you got stuff you got to do, and I have been enjoying watching those videos. I can't wait for this one for Fredericksburg, the animated map for Murray's Heights to come out.
Yeah, that one, that's taken me a long time to animate. So it's, I'm happy. I hope everybody enjoys it, because man, it took me a lot of time to bring that to everybody.
Oh, I love every one you put up. I mean, you got so many great ones. I don't know if the other night we were having an ongoing debate in there. I get aggravated at the people who they went back to Longstreet on the second day, and I get aggravated at people because it's almost like it's sacrilegious if you criticize Longstreet. Mm-hmm. They were bringing up, he wasn't slow on the second day, and I was like, yes, he was slow. I don't care how you cut it. And so I posted. I said, here, I posted that video that you did about if Longstreet says it's true. Somebody's probably lying, or it's probably not.
Yeah.
And I said, this right here, I said, so I don't want to hear any of this stuff about, lost cause people, because there's not one person on there that, like Jubal Early, that y'all associate with it. These are people that you've never heard of, like, I named all of them out there. And I never heard that story before about him and Hood up under the tree. And then one of the guys types back is, this is a never ending controversy. Poor James Longstreet. And I said, no, not poor James Longstreet. Okay. You guys figure out that, that he's some kind of tragic figure in this. I said, but he's not. I said, he's not somebody that's above being criticized. If Longstreet had been killed at, the wilderness, or he had not, or died right after, I said, he would have him lumped to everybody, just like you did Lee and Jackson and all them. I said, remember at the end, when Grant wanted Lee to surrender and he showed Longstreet the letter, he's the one that wadded it up and said, not yet.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
So I don't know why this thing's developed about if you criticize Longstreet, you're just a member of the lost cause group, or
it's usually people who don't understand the situation.
Yeah, it's really aggravating me when it's put in there, poor James Longstreet. No, not poor James Longstreet. It seems like we'll have to get into that later about how Gettysburg is almost tied into these two camps now. About that second day, because I got aggravated with him, and I said he should have been court-martialed after that.
Possibly, but that probably got you a lot of heat.
Oh yeah, and I like to mix it up sometimes in there. Have people get mad and quit because somebody told me the other day said how I've held that group together, and I said, well, I said people quit all the time. I said, pro Southerners and pro Northerners get mad and quit. I said, I've been called there was one thread I got called a sorry lost causer and a anti-Southern carpetbagger or something like that on the same thread. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
how can I be both of them? But I mean, both sides, the hardcore on both sides get mad at me all the time. We had a thing the other day, somebody got mad because, somebody posted a monument to some USCT troops, and I forgot where it was at, but they didn't like having a monument post. I said, look, when people post Confederate monuments, I defend them vigorously. I can't, let one side post and not the other.
Exactly. I don't know why that would. You can't have a double standard there.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've tried to always be is fair. I mean, when I look at ruling on stuff, and like I told these guys, look, I said, pick your battles on this side. I'm on some of the other forums about different wars, and I've never seen the infighting like it is with people about the Civil War.
I think it's because it's so close to home.
It is, and it's like, and I know we're only, when you think in the scheme of things, we're not that many generations removed from it.
No, not a bit.
And there's still so much bitterness still today. I can't imagine what it would have been like. They have this type of hostility today. What it was like in the 20s or 30s.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think it was that bad in the 20s and 30s between the two sides.
See, I don't either. Thinking about that, and I kept thinking, right after the first war, I don't think it was like that. The stuff that I see, but it's almost factoring now today.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Over in, and now it's become. Sometimes when I read these things in there, it's almost like my northern people. It's almost like they lost the war. I thought, hey, you won. But it's I was surprised I didn't have it thing the other day on Veterans Day. Some people was posting different stuff, but I had nobody saying about the Confederate on that. So they weren't American troops. No, there's Confederate troops. But anyway, man, I'm gonna keep y'all going and get this thing start working on this because it's sounding pretty good. And you want to do that? Yeah, let's. That sounds fun to me, man. If you want to do something about for the holidays.
Okay, that works. I'll come up with something for the holidays, and we'll talk about turkey and Santa Claus.
Yeah, and I guess thanks to Lincoln, what was it, 1864 when he made Thanksgiving the holiday, or
Yes, 64.
like think about that the other day. Okay, yeah, turkey and Santa Claus and all that. You got anything planned for the holidays?
I might have to work on Thanksgiving, so I'm waiting to hear back from work.
Yeah, I guess I may go to the Waffle House for Thanksgiving, Christmas. Somebody asked me that. They said, every year somebody asks me, "You going home for Christmas?" Like, no. And they're like, "You're not going to see your family?" And I'll be like, "No, I don't want to be around them, and they wouldn't talk to me anyway." And they're like, "Oh, y'all have a bad relationship?" I was like, "No, I just don't want to be around them." They're like, "Why not?" I was like, "I don't like going to cemeteries. They're all dead." Oh, so we really have to work on Thanksgiving for the park.
Yep.
And
Yeah. We don't get off on holidays. The only holiday we get off is on Christmas.
when you are through with your PhD, are you going to stay with them or are you going to teach?
I want to teach.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I'm wasting the calling if you don't teach.
Yeah, I want to teach more than anything. Just waiting, biding my time till I can find a position that pops open.
Are they hard to get?
Very much so. I just got turned down from one today.
Well,
So,
you think?
yep.
Now, would you be teaching the 300 and 400 level classes right now, or just the 1 and 200?
1 and 200 level.
Now, if you do get that position, the 300 and 400 level, would you be like in a focused area like on the Civil War?
I teach all levels if I was at that position. assistant professor or associate professor would be teaching all levels, and I would get to teach some specialty classes like American Civil War, or American military history, or environmental history.
Okay, because I was just thinking about when I went and we had our professors with their specialties like that. Hey man, I hate that you got turned down for that. They missed out on a great teacher. I don't know how you didn't get it. God.
Yeah, I was a little bummed today.
Sure, man. I hate to hear that because you brought these videos. You brought so much. To, I can't tell you how much I love watching those. I spent hours on them. I hate to hear that, man. But I'm sure you'll get it soon enough. But anyway, I'm sorry to keep you so long, man. Because I know you got a busy man. Got to go to work, but I'll get this up soon enough.
Absolutely, I'm happy to do it. I'm looking forward to our talking about the holidays in 2 weeks.
That'll be fun, man. Do something a little bit different. And until then, you have a good Thanksgiving, and we'll talk soon.
That sounds good, buddy. You too.
All right, buddy. Talk soon.